He's Matt Lively, sports reporter for CBS Sports Bay Area, covering the 49ers out there. Matt, thanks for hopping on Rush. How we doing, man?
I'm great. Happy to be back. Thanks for inviting me back on to talk some Niners.
I love that the last time we had you on, which you were one of the first guests of the program, so it's an honor to have you as a reoccurring guest. It was all the Ayuk talk, the bonanza. Was he going to end up in New England? What did he want? Ayuk's looked bad, but the 49ers as a team are off to a 1-2 start, Matt. And against the Vikings, Brian Flores did what he always does against the 49ers, knows how to shut down that offense, and look what he did to the Texans. But then week 3, blowing those multiple 14-point leads to the Rams, what is up with San Francisco right now?
Yeah, it's been really bizarre the last 2 weeks. I mean, you can contribute week 2 to Brian Flores, and it was our cameras that picked up Purdy saying to Flores, hey, your scheme is crazy. And credit to Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson, who connected on a miracle play, and the rest is history. But week 3, I called a bit of a cupcake game for the Niners. You know, the Rams come in there without Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Sure, there's injuries on the 49ers side, but they still have such a stacked team. And after the first couple of drives, you're saying to yourself, okay, this is going to be a blowout. The Niners are going to run away with this game. It's a great bounce back spot for them. And then they just couldn't put LA away. The special teams was a nightmare. And something that they made a focus this year was finishing in games, not letting anything slip away. And in the last 6 minutes and 15 seconds, 13 unanswered points by Los Angeles. And the Niners came away with their second loss of the season. You can't blame Brock Purdy in this one. You can't blame the injuries. Jauan Jennings had the game of his life, even better than his Super Bowl performance when he would have been the MVP. But there are some defensive things that have to be cleaned up, and the special teams especially, or else the Niners aren't going to go very far this year. But I'm not panicking yet. It's been 3 weeks. There was expected to be a bit of a hangover. And unfortunately, I do feel like this week is the get-right game and a spot to maybe flex the muscle.
We talk about vibes here a lot with just kind of the way the Patriots have been going the last few years. The vibes are consistently pretty low. I was just wondering where they're at in San Francisco, because you expected to be much further along than you are right now. I don't think anybody expected the Patriots and 49ers to both be 1-2 entering this game. So quick vibe check, not just you, but in and around San Francisco Bay Area.
My vibes personally are well. Thank you for asking.
Love
the
it.
49ers vibes themselves. It wasn't where it was in week 1 after that Jets win. I was in the locker room in Minnesota. You don't get a lot of guys who want to talk to you. It was even worse in Los Angeles. But the thing that makes the 49ers so strong is they have so many all-pros on their team who those guys are leaders. And so it's tough for this team to get too off the mark in terms of what their vision is and in terms of the team morale getting too low. So I'm really not super concerned about whether or not the vibes are off after a 1-2 start. Sure, it's not where you would want it to be, but it's early in the season. So vibes have a chance of getting picked back up on Sunday.
You pointed out what Jauan Jennings did. I mean, he was the first Niners receiver with 3 touchdowns since Terrell Owens. First Niners receivers with a 150 and 3 touchdown game since Jerry Rice. So basically he had like a once-in-a-lifetime performance, which is absurd to see, but also to come in a loss was insane as well. But again, Matt, going back to that Brandon Ayuk topic of we brought you on to talk about Ayuk. He's the number 1 wide receiver. He got paid. Debo out. Everyone expected him to be great. I saw the 10 targets on Sunday, but is this a trend of his struggles that you think will continue between him and Brock Purdy, or can it be picked up?
It will be picked up. I pretty much predicted at the beginning of the season, especially for fantasy football owners, you probably don't want to trust Brandon Ayuk early in the season. There's something to be said for guys missing the start of whether it's training camp in football or spring training in baseball. We've seen it in both sports. That time is so valuable for these guys to get their bodies right, to get the conditioning right, for a wide receiver to be on the same page with his quarterback. You cannot put enough emphasis on how important training camp is to a player. We've seen Trent Williams had to get IVs in 2 games now because the conditioning just isn't there yet. But it's going to get back on track. Nick Bosa, who missed all of training camp last year with a similar contract extension issue, it took him until about week 5 or 6, and then we started to see his usual uptick in how he plays the game at a very high level. And I would expect the same from Brandon Ayuk. I think this past week was a really nice look at what he can do, getting the 10 targets. Sure, his numbers aren't exactly where you would want them to be, but there were some opportunities for Brock to hit him late in the game, and they were missed opportunities, but they were signs of positivities to come for Brandon Ayuk. And again, you look at where this New England defense ranks against the pass this year, they're pretty much bottom of the league in terms of defending that. So I think this could be a big game for Ayuk and Purdy, especially with Debo out and Christian McCaffrey out, to get on the same page, maybe get a long pass in there and a couple touchdowns.
I love that you point out how bad the secondary is. It's not a reflection on Christian Gonzalez. No, but he let up that one touchdown against Garrett Wilson. But aside from that, between Chase, DK Metcalf, and Garrett Wilson, he's kept them in check. And again, that was a perfect pass from Aaron Rodgers to beat really good coverage by Keagan. But why the secondary stinks is because we saw smaller corners like Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones get picked on. Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers have to play more in the box with Juwan Bentley down. That leads me to ask, is Jauan Jennings a sustainable level of play? Not 151-3, but him being a key contributor, especially, Matt, at 6'3", 210, that has hunt the matchup. If it's 31 or 25 opposite of him, just target him because he towers over those two smaller corners.
I pointed this out on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, during this Rams game. It's been just too long that Jauan Jennings has been buried in the depth chart. He's had to compete with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, who are two guys that are wide receiver ones on any other team in the NFL. He's just had to compete with them early on in his career, but he's a prototypical, wide receiver. You point out his measurables right there, and when he's been given the opportunity to be involved in the playbook, you really look at last year's playoffs. You look at the Super Bowl when, again, he would have been the MVP. He can toss a touchdown pass. He can catch a touchdown pass. And then he went off the way that he did on Sunday. When the Niners start to use Jauan Jennings the way that he can fully be used, it's trouble for defenses, and we've seen it. He makes some insane catches. He's the dependable third in Jauan. That's where you go on third down because he's Mr. Dependable on those downs. So it's really only a matter of time before some team recognizes what he can do every single down while the offense is on the field. And while there's some injuries ahead of him, I think he's just going to continue to have positive games.
From an outside point of view, I think we've seen it too, right? He slid into that role that Kendrick Bourne played during his time in San Francisco, and we saw him come over here. And Kendrick Bourne's obviously been a fan favorite in New England, but in terms of Jennings and the role he plays, do you think it's going to carry over when a guy like Debo comes back, when Ricky Pearsall, who knows when he'll be ready, but whenever he kind of steps in, do you think he'll be able to keep this, not the same level of production, but the same role in the offense, or will they try to kind of move him around and test him out in different areas?
Probably not. I mean, that's the short answer. He's been here for years now, and when there are guys in front of him, Jauan Jennings just doesn't get the snaps or the looks that Debo is getting, that George Kittle is getting. Wait until McCaffrey comes back into this offense. I actually think Ricky Pearsall, who should be ready by week 5, Kyle Shanahan has a tendency to really ease rookies in. That's why you haven't seen Jordan Mason. He's been a young player that just hasn't gotten his touches. So Ricky Pearsall probably doesn't have an immediate impact, but I still think when Debo's back, when George is back, when CMC is back, Jauan will fall down this depth chart, unfortunately.
When you're talking about all these names, and we get into them, and all these questions about offense, obviously Jordan Mason doesn't have that receiving upside that Christian McCaffrey brings to the offense. Obviously, Jauan Jennings isn't the same versatile type of player that Debo is, but we've seen his usage. And Ayuk hasn't clicked yet. But what will be the recipe for success for the 49ers on Sunday, especially when they're hosting a Patriots defense that we're still trying to figure out ourselves?
I think it's for Kyle Shanahan to just don't overcomplicate things. You've seen just on Sunday against the Rams, the first 2 drives. Oh, this is how you score points. Let Brock Purdy go to work. People still love to doubt Brock Purdy. This game should have been the one where you go, okay, maybe he's legit this time. He is missing Debo and CMC and George Kittle, and he still went out there. He almost threw for 300 yards, and he would have had there not been 6 drops, by the way, 8 incompletions, 6 of them drops. And he tossed 3 touchdown passes. So if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I am letting Brock Purdy rip it. Don't overcomplicate things for him. And look at what the Patriots have allowed already and just go off of that. I think the issues have not been offensive for the Niners so far. They played one really good defensive coordinator and Brian Flores, but they looked great against the Jets, and they looked great last week until things just kind of fell apart. So don't overcomplicate things and let Brock go to work.
We've talked about the one offense worth talking about, but I want to transition to the offense that's really probably not worth talking about with the Patriots. Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, obviously all the offensive line issues. I think anybody who's watched a game knows that it's a mess over there. But the 49ers have a pretty big injury that kind of came across this week with Javon Hargrave out for the season. Where do you kind of see them looking to fill in his role? And obviously the Patriots, they're a run-first team. Gerard Mayo's told everybody, we're telling you we're going to run the ball. You have to stop it. You know, who slides into that role to try to stop the Patriots' run game? Because we've seen when they can get that going, it kind of opens everything up for Jacoby Brissett and co.
Well, that's pretty much the issue right now is they don't have that guy to fill Hargrave's spot. They let Eric Armstead walk during free agency this year because they wanted somebody next to Hargrave who was more of a run stopper, and they brought in Malik Collins. And so far, it hasn't yielded the best results. And now you lose Hargrave and you go, okay, there's seriously a big issue here. And realistically, the guy who they're going to call on, Mr. Do-It-All, is Fred Warner to stuff the box at this point at the middle linebacker position. But I believe that the Patriots' success on offense is going to be through Ramondre Stevenson and the run game. I don't see Brissett having a big game. I think his prop right now is 162.5 passing yards, which is a bit laughable to me coming off the performance that he had last week. So I really think that the Patriots could have their way in the run game. You couple that with Bosa and Leonard Floyd aren't really getting pressure and aren't getting into the backfield as quickly as you would like. I do think Stevenson could have a nice day for himself.
Yeah, like you point out, that 162 for Jacoby. I guess the books see this will be a blowout in favor of the Niners. The spread's at 10.5, depending where you look. And they can see him chucking, but I don't see him staying in this game and being healthy enough to even get close to that, because they might have to call the dogs off, put in Drake May, get him in the game. But I would get away from that whole combo, Matt. We still see an offensive line that has a rookie left tackle that's basically their third string and should be a right tackle, a left guard that could be a backup or third string, depending on who's out there, a center that's a vet, that's solid, a rookie right guard that should be a backup, and their right tackle should be their right guard. For listeners of Foxboro Rush, I keep pointing this out, but that's a reality of what they have to work with. And I say that in a way, pump the brakes on putting Drake May in, but we're talking 49ers. What is this defense like for the 49ers? You pointed it out. The pressures aren't there. They're not stopping the run. The Vikings and the Rams had a lot of success on third down and fourth down for LA. What is up with this defense this year? Because you still have Hufanga, you still have Fred Warner, and you still have Bosa. All three guys you can say are the best at their position.
Well, I think you do have to contribute some of this to Nick Sorensen, who's in his first year as a defensive coordinator. And so fans immediately go, well, Steve Wilks didn't work. Why isn't this guy working? He's running the scheme that Kyle Shanahan wants to work. And I think when you look at how complicated an NFL defense can be, just be patient. You have to give some time to fully get on the same page. Nick Bosa is confused about the lack of production. He said that they have to really marinate in that loss. They shouldn't just move on like it was nothing. And so I think the defense is waking up to the fact that something has to be done. And you point out all the issues that New England has on their offensive line. And maybe this is the week where Bosa and Floyd are living in the backfield. But I would just say it's about patience so far for the 49ers. They're missing Dre Greenlaw, and Devondre Campbell has not been someone who's necessarily lived up to the play that the Niners were hoping when they brought him in to be Greenlaw's stopgap until he can come back. Hufanga made his first start and returned to the field just this past Sunday. So they're able to get him back here, and he's only going to get more comfortable as the season goes on. I was confused by some coverages in that Minnesota game. I would have personally had Mooney Ward shadowing Justin Jefferson that entire time, and instead they went with a couple of safeties. So I think it's a learning progress right now, or learning process. And again, unfortunately, I do feel like maybe this is the game in week 4 here where you've had 3 under your belt for things to start to click, and the victims just might be New England.
Yeah, I just imagine Bosa gets back on track again against that awful offensive line play. Matt, it was 35. I'm sure you watched it Thursday night. It was 35 dropbacks, 22 total pressures. Jacoby Brissett is being pressured at one of the highest rates in the NFL as well per dropback. This offensive line doesn't do him justice. The receivers don't get separation. What I looked at too, though, just like watching the last 2 Niners games, there was a block punt against the Vikings. There was that long return allowed against the Rams that set up their game-winning drive. is special teams an actual red flag with this unit, or are you watching and going, it's one or two errors and it's 3 games into this season that's been utter chaos? That is something they can get settled down. Because, Matt, right now I'm just trying to find of where the Patriots can find any sort of success against this San Fran team.
No, the special teams is actually the one place that I would point and go, that is a weakness of the San Francisco 49ers. In Minnesota, Jacob Cowing muffed a punt that the Niners were thankful enough to jump back on, basically at their own 10-yard line. Then you have the fake punt right before halftime that Los Angeles runs. And Kyle Shanahan said, we actually thought they were going to fake it there. They still allowed 7 yards and a first down, which set up a touchdown right before half. And so, it makes you wonder, well, if you guys hadn't seen the fake punt, coming, what would that have looked like? So I would say right now you have a really inexperienced punt returner in Jacob Cowing, who's still trying to get his footing. Jake Moody is as hot and cold as it comes in the National Football League. He was 6 for 6 in week 1. And for all those Niners fans that were hating on him last year, it was like, okay, it's fine. He's in his second year. He's back. He misses a field goal on Sunday that essentially cost him the game. And they've been giving up a ton of yards on returns, whether it's punt or in this new dynamic kickoff. So special teams, maybe that's where New England has a bit of an upper hand. I don't think that wins them a game or gets them particularly close. But yes, I'm with you there. If New England can capitalize on something, it is on the special teams units of the 49ers.
I'm trying to find some silver lining. I'm trying to find some matchup that can give a leeway. Hey, Jeremy Springer, now the special teams coordinator for the Patriots, spent a lot of time with the Rams, probably making some phone calls. So let's all put it right here. This is where you bookmark it in the pod. Watch for the Patriots to pull off some special teams madness against the Niners, because I'm sure Jeremy Springer is cooking the books right now and ripping his phone like crazy. Matt, before we let you go, real quick, what's a prediction for Sunday?
I'm going to go 27-10 San Francisco. It could get higher on that SF side, but with all the injuries that they're experiencing right now, I think that's a safe number to go with. But it's a 10.5-point spread. I'm okay laying those points with the Niners at home.
Yeah, closest I'll go 27-13. I think the one thing I'll give the Pats, all those missed tackles they had against the Jets, that's going to be trouble if they do the same thing. Jordan Mason is just so unpredictable. One thing we can always predict is you, Matt Lively. My man, thanks for hopping on the pod. Appreciate you always bringing the great insight out from San Francisco. He's Matt Lively, CBS Sports Bay Area, covers the 49ers. Make sure to throw him a follow. Matt, thanks for hopping back on the show, brother.